All right, this is going to be the first of two videos I'm going to make on comparative advantage and competitive advantage. And I'm going to start with this one by looking at competitive advantage. And we're going to use the same basic example that they have in the book, but with some slightly different numbers. I think it's easier to see how specialization is working when we start with competitive advantage or absolute advantage, and then we'll get into comparative advantage. We'll only need comparative advantage, but this first video is going to look at competitive advantage. So in the book, the authors have this example of Gwen and Blake from The View, I guess The Voice. And there's two goods in there, our simple economy here, pizza and wings. Okay, so I've changed it up here. And the first numbers I have up here to start with are going to show their production possibilities if they devoted all of their day to producing one of the items. So they can't produce both of these. They can produce one or the other. So just so you understand the production possibilities, if Gwen devotes her whole day to making pizzas, she can make 20 pizzas. She spends her whole day making wings, she makes 40 wings. So maybe these are giant wings, or maybe these are mini pizzas. But Blake makes 40 pizzas and then 20 wings. Okay, so for absolute or competitive advantage, what you look at is the competitive advantage. A person has competitive advantage if they're able to produce more of a good than the other person. So we can simply look at these productivities, and this will give us who has the competitive advantage. The bigger number, the bigger productivity is the competitive advantage. So it's set up here where Gwen is particularly good at making wings, and Blake is good at making pizza. But if they don't specialize and trade with each other, then they have to make. They're basically on their own. They have to make whatever they're going to consume. And this is going to give us a baseline, a jumping off point. And what we're going to end up showing is that they can both be better off if they specialize in the good that they have a competitive advantage making. So if they don't consume, well, let's suppose that they have linear production possibilities. And so Gwen's going to put half of her day into making pizza and half of her day into making wings. And if she puts half a day into making pizza, well, she can produce half as much as what she has here. So instead of 20, she can make 10 pizzas and 20 wings. And that's what she would have to consume, because they're just in isolation. And Blake would have 20 pizzas, that's half of his total, he could produce 10 wings. So that's what they would each have. And if we came over here and graphed this, we would have a production possibilities frontier. And have it for Gwen here. She'd have the ability to produce 40 wings or 20 pizzas. And we're assuming of linear production. So here's the PPF. It's a straight line, meaning that if she devotes half of her time to making pizza and half her time for making wings, she'll end up with 10 and 20, which is what she has here as a jumping off point to start with. So this would be their standard of living if they don't engage in specialization and trade. So on their own, they do something like this. Now, let's suppose that they specialize, and it's easier to see how they should specialize with competitive advantage. Gwen is better at making wings. Blake is better at making pizzas. So specialize in the thing that you're good at. So if Gwen, instead of spending half of her day making pizza and half of her day making wings, she puts her whole day into making wings. She makes no pizzas, but 40 wings. And Blake specializes in pizza. He'll make 40 pizzas and no wings. So this is now what they have in terms of production. And in fact, Gwen has moved from like here in the middle of her PPF down here to this end of the PPF for production purposes. But they can trade. Now, the trade it can be somewhat arbitrary. There's a lot of different trades they might conceivably agree to. Well, let's suppose that they're going to trade 15 pizzas for 15 wings. So Gwen starts with wings. She'll trade wings for pizzas on a 1-to-1 ratio. And let's just suppose that they trade 15 for 15. 15 wings for 15 pizzas. So Gwen had 40 wings. You'd have to take 15 away. She's left with 25. But she gets 15 wings in, back from Blake. Blake starts with 40 pizzas, trades 15 of them to Gwen, so he's left with 25. But he gets 15 wings from Gwen. So after they produce and trade, they're ready to consume, and they have Gwen has 15 pizzas and 25 wings. Blake has 25 pizzas and 15 wings. You can see that when they weren't specializing and they had to produce for themselves, they had 10 and 20 each. So they have more of both goods. We can say here that they're both better off because ultimately our standard of living or wealth, and this goes back to what Adam Smith said, the wealth of nations really comes down to our ability to consume goods. Consumption is what we're ultimately about. Consumption is what we actually get satisfaction, happiness, utility from, not simply producing. We produce so we can consume. A higher standard of living means more consumption, and we can see that they have more of both goods. So they should both prefer what they have here to here. They're both better off by specializing in trading than they would be if they just went it on their own. In fact, if they specialize, what we notice is that it's not quite what we have in this example. If you specialize, you usually end up getting even better at what you're doing. So if Gwen was able to, just dividing up her time every day, do 20 or 40, if she did nothing but make wings, she'd probably even learn more shortcuts in terms of making wings, and might maybe end up getting more to be able to produce more than 40 wings. So that's a longer term effect of specialization. But simply taking advantage of your differences in productive abilities, you can specialize and trade. We can also come over here and look at this on the graph, and we can see that 15 and 25 for Gwen, let me see, 25 wings and 15 pizzas would be out here. It would be a point that's beyond her production possibilities frontier, just on her own. And remember, that was like economic growth. We said economic growth shifts the production possibilities frontier for an economy out, and specialization in trade, in effect, gets the same thing. And it allows somebody to get to a point that they could not possibly have gotten on their own. There's another way you can think about what's going on here. Gwen can make either pizza or wings, but if she's good at making wings, in effect, she's going to make pizzas by making wings. She's going to specialize and make wings and then trade them in the market for pizzas. And because she's better at making wings, she'll have the ability to trade. She'll have the ability to more efficiently make pizza by making wings and then trading them in the market for pizza than trying to make them herself. And that's in effect what's going on here. She moves down here, produces all wings, and then trades them back. So it's really, with trade, it's as if she's got a PPF that looks something like this. It's beyond what it already started with, and it allows her to be better off, and allows both people to be better off. And this is an important point. We talk about gains from trade. Gains from trade exist for both people. A lot of people think that economics and business is what's known as a zero-sum game. That if you add up the wins and losses of different people, they must sum to zero. Economics is not about that. Most economic interactions are going to be positive sum games. Both people can be better off by specializing in trading than they would be on their own. Both people are better off. It's not the case that Gwen's taking advantage of Blake or Blake's taking advantage of Gwen. They are trading, they are specializing in trading, and they are both better off as they would view it themselves. So that's competitive advantage. I'm going to do a second video in which we'll use some of the numbers from the book, and that'll illustrate comparative advantage. But again, I think it's easier to see comparative advantage after we start with a competitive advantage example. So that's competitive advantage.